Welcome to episode 5 of the Runner Boys podcast. I'm Hayden Pretty, and I'm joined by my co-host, Gavin Atkinson, and our very special guest, Cole Sprout.
Appreciate you inviting me. Glad to be here, man.
Yeah, for sure. We have a lot to talk about today, so without further ado, let's jump right in.
Okay.
Welcome to the podcast, Cole. Tell us a little bit about yourself for the people that don't already know you.
Yeah, so I currently run for Nike Swoosh Track Club. I'm out here in Eugene, Oregon, training for a half marathon right now. Recently moved up to the roads with a marathon in my sights. So that is what I'm up to right now. I'm really enjoying that. To rewind a little bit, I'm from Colorado, grew up in the mountains outside of Denver, got into endurance sport from a young age, grew up in a very active family. So we were out mountain biking, camping, backpacking, fishing, skiing, the whole 9 yards. I always loved the outdoors and the purity of sport like running, just endurance sport in whatever shape. I actually got into endurance sport, mountain bike racing, doing that with my family. From there, I started, doing the PE mile and doing track in 7th grade. And I just had a pretty instant knack for it. I kept doing it through the remainder of middle school, and I just continued to get better and better. Everybody likes to be good at something and likes to find that thing that just feels very natural, like they were meant to do that. And running definitely felt that way from a very young age. In like 8th grade, freshman year, one of our close family friends, his brother knew the head coach at Stanford. And so I had that idea implanted in my brain from a relatively young age, like 8th grade, probably freshman year, maybe even younger, that I would try to join the Stanford track team. As I was getting into the sport, I was like, well, that's a pretty good goal to shoot for. I was into sciences and thought of myself as somebody who wanted to be an engineer one day. Like, that was my vision for what I would do, but it was all like very loosey-goosey and nothing very clear. So yeah, I just kept doing the sport. It kept showing up. I don't know. I was just kind of willfully ignorant that it wouldn't work out. I just continued to improve to the point where I was competing on a national level in high school, getting the attention of a lot of the blue chip universities and programs like Stanford. They were, I think, the second school to reach out to me. So it just kind of seamlessly fell into place. And so yeah, I ended up choosing to go to Stanford. I took a few visits, a few different schools, but it just felt like the right fit. The group of guys I really resonated with, and the head coach, I also felt like it would be just a good fit moving from my high school career. Yeah, I did 5 years at Stanford with like a master's year tacked on to the back end. I'm very grateful for that entire experience. In some ways, it wasn't as seamless as high school. Everything was just very easy and I didn't have to think about anything, but it was a very formative 5 years. So that, in a nutshell, is my running journey up to this point. Yeah, I'm grateful to now be running professionally, sponsored by Nike.
Heck yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, appreciate it. No, it's been fun, man. No, it's crazy. I was making a video, like a reel last night. It was like my mile PR throughout the years. I don't go back and look at a lot of that stuff too often, so it was kind of nostalgic to go back. And I didn't even know in 7th grade, I was like, I didn't even know what I ran in a mile. I had to ask my mom
Right.
to pull up some old Facebook posts or an old Instagram post. And it's just crazy to like put into perspective. I remember my first mile was like 5:36, 7th grade. Like, that was my best mile. Yeah, my PR now is like 3:56. A really bizarre to like condense it down into like whatever the 7-8 years it's been. So
Yeah, no, that makes sense, because like the way I see it, running isn't always like completely linear. Big things happen very quickly, and the rest of it's just like a slow grind. I think that's kind of what you're getting at.
yeah, no, it's life. I think that's why the skills and the lessons that you learn as an athlete, especially in the sport of running, are so transferable to everything else you do. Yeah, there's highs, there's lows. Sometimes you put in a lot of work, it doesn't always materialize into the outcomes you want or expect, and you have to really grapple with your why. When it doesn't work out, were you just in it for the outcomes that you were chasing, or are you prepared to acknowledge that this is a part of the process, taking a few steps back to go a few steps forward.
For our first topic, it's mileage. How much should we be running depending on what race we're training for? Cole, we'll start with you.
Yeah, that was a great question. I think it depends a lot on what you're racing. A friend of mine who races the 800, or a lot of people that I know who race the 800, they do as little as 20 miles a week. And they can get away with that because it's a highly anaerobic, speed-based event. Whereas I'm training for the half marathon now, and I'm running 95 to 100 miles a week. There are different schools of thought when you get kind of to the intersection of speed and strength, like the 800 or the mile. There's the school of thought that speed is strength, and the more miles you do, the more volume you have under your legs, the better. The other school of thought is that training your body to be as efficient over high speeds, like that is what will make you the best 800 runner. But I think for me, I get a lot of benefit. I've gotten a lot of benefit from the volume, but it's dependent, subjective to the person too.
Yeah, like you'd say. What about you, Gavin?
So I kind of add on to what you said at the end there. I think another thing, you can't just look at it from a what distance are you running perspective. I think you also have to look at where you are fitness-wise as an athlete, because there's also how much mileage your body can handle at your current fitness too, if that makes sense. Obviously, if I was to go out and start training for a half marathon right now, I couldn't jump into 9,500 mile weeks because I would get injured within 2 of those. So I think you also have to look at having that balance of, okay, if I'm training for a very long distance, am I getting enough mileage in that I'm getting the most volume I can while also not pushing my body so far that I'll get injured within a couple of weeks. Back when I was training for cross country season, I was doing like 75, 80 miles a week. I didn't realize at the time that was too far ahead of where I was at, if that makes sense. I ended up getting injured in cross country season. If I ran 10 miles a week lower and ran like 70, I might not have gotten as much mileage in, but I also might not have gotten injured. Making sure you have that proper balance of running appropriate amount for that distance while also not running too much for that distance.
I like that take. For me, people either run way too much or not enough. I feel like there's not really like a particular amount for the distance you run. It's not like, okay, half marathon, you're running 90 a week, and if you don't run 90 a week, you're not peaking. I feel like it's different for everybody. You have to find that sweet spot. And oftentimes, I feel like elite high school athletes, you see these people and you think they're not running very much. Like you said, 800, I think you can get away with 20 or 30, and sometimes that's ideal. But especially for like 1500, 5K, I see the most improvement athletes. There was my friend ran 450 as a sophomore, and now he's running like 404 as a senior. And he bumped his mileage up from like 15 to like 50 or 60 even in track season. It's better to go higher than lower, in my opinion, but also while not just chasing miles and sacrificing good volume in your training and intentional workouts. Chasing mileage isn't going to get you anywhere either. The miles, just all easy or all hard, isn't going to get you anywhere. You have to really differentiate your easy runs from your workouts. Like I see people running like 30 seconds or 45 seconds between their workouts and their easy runs. And it should be more
crazy.
Like, I know, right? It should be like at least over a minute or something like that. Like if you're running 5:30s for a certain workout, your easy should be like 7:15.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Heart rate's like a good proxy I like to use, where heart rate is whatever in the green, blue zone. You're doing the right job and recovering well after a workout where you were pushing that threshold pace.
And I really wanted to invest in a heart rate monitor. Are there any you suggest as an elite athlete?
Ooh, honestly, most are more than adequate in terms of like their accuracy, I'd say. I have a Garmin. It's the 265S. So it's like the smaller watch face, just so it's like a little bit more minimal, which honestly I'm a fan of. But I wear both this Garmin and a Whoop band typically because I don't like to sleep with my watch. And the Whoop band, in terms of like fidelity of the sensor to capture heart rate variability, for instance, is a lot better than the Garmin's or an Oura Ring. Depends like what your use case is. Like if you want something just to have while you're running to measure your heart rate, then Garmin's probably the way to go because it also has GPS and all that. I'm kind of an expert in this domain, or I feel like I am. I've been doing a lot of research lately. I'm working with a tech startup where we're like building out a unified analytics platform, pulling from basically like any wearable device. So that's why I'm wearing both of these. Because I'm a bit of a guinea pig of the product that we're building. Yeah, so I do have I've got some stake in the game, some skin in the game, I guess you could say.
Yeah, it's sick. I'm excited for that. So for our second topic, it's how has NIL deals changed the landscape of collegiate sports? Cole, we'll start with you.
Yeah, NIL's changed a lot about collegiate sports for sure. I think I have a unique experience because I joined before NIL was ever a thing. I think it was like my sophomore year, NIL was starting to be introduced at the collegiate level and maybe the high school level as well. Not always, but there has been a trend of closing the gap between amateurism and professional sports. And especially as a collegiate athlete, but pre-NIL, there was a bit of a bitter taste in a lot of athletes' mouths because these institutions were able to generate a lot of revenue from their athletes, particularly your big sports like football, basketball, like the revenue generating sports, not track and field, unfortunately. So there's a bit of resentment, I think, from the athlete's perspective that we weren't able to profit off of our name, image, and likeness that the university could. That was, I think, a great benefit in introducing the NIL frameworks into universities for athletes to take advantage of the opportunities that existed and kind of market themselves as a, semi-pro amateur where, you could profit off of your name recognition if you were a really big name in the athletic space, while it also not being tied to performance directly. So it was kind of a nice sweet spot for these brands to connect with athletes and start to create a relationship before signing them as a professional athlete. That's at least how it kind of went in running space. I had an NIL deal with On Running the last 2 years at Stanford. It was a really cool experience because I was able to dip my toes in the water, so to speak, in what it would be like to be a sponsored professional without the higher stakes of racing or being sponsored with performance being what derives my contract and my compensation, directly speaking. Yeah, I think it's a really invaluable mechanism to more easily transition from college to professional. It also is a slippery slope. Amateurism doesn't really exist anymore, like as a collegiate athlete if you're good enough. And honestly too, I think this is still for the benefit of the athlete, where the athlete can be sponsored and get compensated almost as much as if they were professional, especially in the big sports. They're still able to get an education and not feel the same pressure to instantly go pro whenever that opportunity is available. So I think it is still like relatively beneficial, or more beneficial than the old structure, for athletes to develop before going professional while being compensated for their investment in the sport. So kind of long-winded, but yeah, that's kind of my take. Gavin, what about you?
This might be a weird way to ask this question because I'm obviously not in college, so I don't understand how NIL and stuff works. But I know for football, NIL plays a deal and okay, I'm going to go to this school for a year, but the year after this school has offered me more money to play here. Can I then transfer schools? Is there any of that also in the track and field world as well? Or is that more in those revenue generating sports like you were talking about?
It's more in the revenue generating sports. Programs or universities will revenue share or split with their athletes. So if football is making millions of dollars, they split that with their athletes, or have NIL collective or pool they can then share, distribute to the starter players. Yeah, but there's not as much, at least at Stanford. It's also dependent on what kind of a program or university you went to. Stanford, they weren't the ones to facilitate a lot of NIL stuff. I did this kind of on my own, separate from Stanford, and so there could be a bit of friction where Stanford is Nike sponsored school, but I was then an on sponsored athlete. I was a Nike sponsored athlete when I was at meets and when I was at practice, anything that was Stanford sanctioned. But then outside of that, I was an on-sponsored athlete. It depended. Some programs I know, the teams themselves, would have money that they would throw at athletes to try and sweeten the deal, get them to transfer or whatever.
Right.
Yeah, I just wasn't sure if that kind of existed to the same degree as it does in football or basketball or something like that.
Yeah, there's still some of it. Distance runners in general are typically more nerdy and less willing to just transfer willy-nilly. Maybe that's a hasty generalization, but it's also different numbers. If you're getting offered 7 figures to go transfer to a school, that it's pretty hard to turn down.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's not the money that it's not the money I was being offered.
Yeah, I personally don't really have too terribly many thoughts to add to it just because I'm still a high school athlete. NIL does not affect me in the slightest at all. But
what's the NIL space like in high school?
As far as my school is concerned, we do not have anything NIL related that I'm aware of. At least for Mississippi, where I'm from, I've never seen that at all in the high school level. I've not seen high school sponsored athletes. That could also be because we're not as big of a state when it comes to track and field. As far as I guess the number of elite athletes we have compared to some other states is a lot smaller as far as the high school level is concerned. But it's just not something I really see at my level.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, Mississippi isn't historically a huge, it's not like a California, that are that's just spawning a million, D1 athletes every day. Because, I'm curious. Obviously, it was before my time. High school was no NIL or anything. You couldn't take money for any reason. So
I think my take on it is that it's mostly positive, but there's also dangers to it. So I feel like it's opened up a lot of opportunities for athletes who otherwise might decide to go pro to stick with a college and be more loyal to them because, they get in the bag. But
Mhm.
instead of going pro and like they think, oh, maybe I'm risking something by staying in college and not getting paid because what if I get injured or this or that? But if they're getting paid a good bit or similar money to what they would get paid if they're going pro, then honestly that gives more loyalty to the school. Oftentimes people competing for 4 years. I mean, you don't normally see track people like drop out of college. Sometimes spinners do or something like that. I think Noah Lyles did. I think he dropped out of Florida. But like NIL gives a lot of opportunities for elite runners to kind of get a taste of what professional contracts and things like that are. Just graduated high school last year, so not a whole lot of opportunities either because I live in Tennessee. So there's a good pack of elite runners in Tennessee I know that have been offered a few things because it's interesting to see in bigger cities, especially like Sam Ruth. Isn't he already sponsored by Nike at 16?
Yeah. You never
Right.
know how long it'll last too, you know? You might as well just soak it in while you can, make the most of it. But yeah, it's crazy. It's 16. It's cool to watch though. I think it's good for the sport overall for sure.
All right. So for our next topic, so in a sport where your value is often tied to a time that you run in races, like your performances and stuff, how do you maintain a healthy perspective when you have a race that doesn't go as well as you would like, or you have like a off season where you just aren't hitting the times you wanted to? How do you deal with that mentally?
It's easier said than done. Definitely at first, but even to this day, like sometimes I don't handle it well. Always a struggle. I think for one, it's ignorant to, or just not necessarily healthy to pretend like it isn't going to affect you. When you put so much effort and time into something and the outcome doesn't align with what your expectation was, it's always going to be frustrating. For one, accepting that and knowing that it's fine for it to be frustrating or for you to feel frustrated afterwards is healthy. Obviously, if you then wallow in that and can't snap out of it to then just like keep moving and take whatever silver linings and things you've learned from it to then apply to making yourself better in the future. If you don't do that, I think that's when you can get in trouble of feeling like you've hit a roadblock and you can't move past it. Definitely through practice and experience of not having races or results that I wanted or having outcomes that didn't align with my expectations and goals. Just get to practice. Like you get to practice feeling the frustration, letting it pass, and just getting back to work, applying the lessons you learned and spinning it into something positive. I think, like I mentioned briefly, a lot of my high school career was very seamless and I didn't have to really question it. It just worked. And that's why at Stanford, I had a bit more of a non-linear progression. It obviously sucked to not just win everything because I like to win. That's my preference.
Yeah.
If I have to choose between winning
Right.
or losing.
I mean, who wouldn't?
Right?
Yeah, who wouldn't? I realized like I was learning a lot more about myself and about the sport and about why I was doing the sport through the times that I lost and through the times that, my goals didn't come to fruition. It made me a better athlete. It made me a more well-rounded person because I understood myself a bit more. And, when you're faced with the reality of things not necessarily working, you have, one of two options. You can either, like I said, you can wallow in it, continue to wonder like, why didn't it work out? Why me? Like, woe is me? And you can take the pity route, or you can be like, okay, like what can we do about it? Did I not give 100%? Was this an error on my side? And if so, like, let's just tweak it, little by little. And so it's an iterative process. Like the valleys are just as much a part of the sport as the mountains you get to climb. I think that's a beautiful process, honestly. It always is going to suck when you hit the rough patches, but knowing that, hey, I've gotten through it before, it's nothing new. It's just something that you got to weather the storm. And experience and time is the best way to learn to bounce back. And each time you bounce back a little bit quicker and a little bit quicker. At least in my experience, that's been the case where, it doesn't seem like all or nothing. The first injury you get, you're like, oh man, is this the end? Like, and there's always like that little voice in the back of your head, but you just learn to not give it that much weight because it's irrational.
We try to look at running as just this set thing of it's the effort you put into it is what you get. And oftentimes that's true. It's more true than a lot of sports. Running is very dependent on you. It's not dependent on other people. And if you don't put the training in, you're not going to be there. So like just because you train does not mean you'll get it, but if you don't train, there's no chance you get it. Running is not always linear. It's not just a straight path. I like to imagine it as like a curvy road. So like you have straights, you have sections that are very clear and visible. There are these huge curves that you have to go around. A lot of people fall off before they get to the top, but it's worth it to see the view at the top and see all you've been through, because if you just succeed, then you really won't learn anything. You learn some for success, but you learn 3 times as much from failing. People like Thomas Edison, he failed 100 times before he successfully made the light bulb. Or there's just so many examples of people using failure as fuel, and not in like a corny way or something like that, but like just really envisioning, hey, I did this wrong. What went wrong about that? And how do I tweak that accordingly in my training? So like, oh, I ran too many miles this day, or my body really doesn't like when I take this, or I really need to fuel before this. Honestly, I like to keep a journal where things that didn't work out or stuff like that, I like to write it down and see, okay, this went wrong, so how can I tweak this accordingly so I don't make that mistake again? I feel like the biggest thing is just the mindset. Really not focusing on the bad, but looking ahead, because running is about the journey, it's not about the destination. And if you're just chasing an NCAA championship, or to win your state's high school championship, or to win the Chicago Marathon, at whatever stage it is, if you're just so focused on that goal and not taking it day by day, you'll start to get extremely burnt out. It'll almost just feel like a chore to you. You could work just as hard, but have the right mindset and it go 100% better. Not even changing your training, just changing your mindset. It can be the difference between success and failure. It's up to mindset. I think running is so much more than just putting one foot in front of the other. I think mindset plays a huge role, and people should really be aware of where they are mentally, should work on stuff like that. That's my take on it. What do you think about it, Gavin?
I agree with both of y'all. I believe that whenever you have times where you aren't performing at your best, even if you may have trained as hard as you've ever trained before, it's not, I trained really hard for this, so I'm going to do good at this. I think if you train hard so you have a better chance at doing good at it, you can train as hard as you want, but that doesn't guarantee you results, if that makes sense. You have to get rid of that mindset of, you can't believe that you're guaranteed to get better just because you've trained more. Training helps you get better, but I don't think it guarantees success. As far as bouncing back from tough races, I believe that I don't tie my success in races to what time I run. I try to tie it more to, if I finish the race and I can honestly say to myself, I went out there and gave it everything I had. I didn't leave anything on the table. I tried as hard as I could given the circumstances and the fitness I was at in that moment, then I think that's a successful race, even if I don't necessarily PR or meet the goals that I had. Especially, I had to adopt this during cross country because I was dealing with an injury. You go out there, and did I expect to run the best I ever had? No. But as long as I could say that I tried, even if I didn't get the result I wanted, then I felt as if that was good enough for me in that time. I think there is time where it's okay to want to chase after a specific time or something, but I think at the end of the day, you can't let your success be tied to just a number of saying how fast you ran. That's just like that. My thoughts on that.
Yeah, that'll set you up for success, because you can't control the outcome like that. All you have is this present moment. All you have is the process. When states rolls around, and even let's say you win everything, your life doesn't just like end at that point, or there's always another hill to climb. There's always something next. Yeah, I think it can be just as bad when you hype up something in your mind so much, and then you actually do achieve that goal, and then you realize you're just the same. Nothing changed. The truth of the matter is that nothing really changes. It's just your perception of whatever that goal is, whatever that outcome is. So yeah, that's a really good point.
Like to tell what he was saying, let's say you're trying to break 4:30 in the mile. If the day before you hadn't do it, you show up to a race and you break 4:30, are you really a different person? Have you really changed that much, or have you just proven that you can run a certain time?
Yeah, I think one more thing for me would be, stop feeling so sorry for yourself. No one's going to throw you a pity party. You have to pick up where you left off. Last year, I ran my first marathon ever, and I was trying to qualify for the Boston Marathon. Made it 25 miles before I collapsed. And I told myself, I'm like, dang, I don't know if I'm ever going to run a marathon again. I don't know if it's even worth it. And I just wasted like 2 months of training after that when I was cleared to run, because I just was overthinking like crazy, and I felt so sorry for myself, and it's like, why? Pick up where you left off and keep training. And so I'm doing that now, attempting to make it to the sub-elite level of the marathon. I just think the biggest thing is not throwing yourself a pity party and just keep moving forward, because you're going to face those. It's going to suck. It's how you bounce back that really defines you as an athlete. Honestly, more than success, you look at the GOATs of distance running or basketball. It's not that they were necessarily the most accomplished, they won the most MVPs, they had the most All-Americans, but that they were tough and that they were gritty and that they pushed through even when everything and everybody was telling them to stop, and that they had the tenacity to push through anyways. So for our fourth topic, it's the death of the off season. We see high schoolers running pros times now. Is the burnout going to skyrocket, or are we just learning to adapt and optimize our training? Start with you, Cole.
No, I think I lean more towards that we're just optimizing training, nutrition. Democratization of information has never been higher. You can know and be an expert in anything, and you can parse through all human knowledge more easily than you ever could. My thought is that we're just more literate in the most sophisticated methodologies for training at a very high level. You know, Jakob, like he's from a very young age, he was doing a very intensive and robust training program. And obviously, like he had very big success as a young athlete, and he's continued to have that success because his training regimen is just so absolutely dialed and perfected for him. You know, he's an edge case, like he's an outlier for sure. To be able to like
Right.
maintain that psychologically, even, you know, to be the best for your entire life pretty much, it's a heavy cross to bear. You know, he is resilient and has the tools at his disposal to do that very well. Only going to see that be more the norm.
Yeah, I like that take. What about you, Gavin?
As far as I know, in the high school level, in my experience, it's less of people are training more and more of just people that have natural talent are being able to better connect with coaches who know how to use that natural talent and work with those athletes. People who have that natural talent now have the resources from a younger age to train at the level they need to in order to fully use their natural abilities. So it's like, I think that's kind of what's happening. We saw Sam Ruth run sub 350. There's a chance that there's always been people that were capable of doing it at that age. I think we're starting to get into a case of the talent is getting found earlier and earlier in their lives, which has allowed them to train for more. So we're seeing that kind of performance at a younger age, if that makes sense. I don't think it's necessarily a situation of people are just training more and that they're going to get burnt out. I think it's just the training is starting at proper times and is a lot more effective and optimized towards the individual athlete.
For sure. I like that.
Yeah, for me, I kind of have mixed feelings about it. I see a lot of high schools who were kind of pushed into sports super early in life, and I think if they're willing to take on that burden, go for it. But I feel like also in the modern landscape of running, people have also pushed on people like the idea of like all or nothing. At the end of the day, no one's forcing us to run. We run because we love it. I mean, we don't want to work at some grocery store or something. We're all training to become pro athletes or something if that's what we want to do with our lives. If that's what we really want to do, I feel like people who push us to the absolute limit, if they know what they're talking about, I think it's a good thing. But I feel like there's a lot of advice from people that are like, well, you should do this or you should do that. They don't exactly know what they're talking about. I feel like there's a lot of, quote, false prophets in the running community. It's hard to decipher like good running advice from things like that. Like I feel like running is a very fine line. We train at the point where it's like pretty close to injury, and if we ran this much more or we did this, then we could have the risk of injury or being out for an extended period of time. The biggest part of not getting burnout and optimizing is listening to your body. I feel like people use that too much as an excuse to not run, but I feel like listening to your body is sometimes like if you can push more to push more. No one knows your body more than you do. Even the most elite coach in the world doesn't know you as good as you. So you can take advice from all these coaches who probably are more knowledgeable about training or things like that, but at the end of the day, they don't know you more than you know you. So you really have to be in touch with yourself, knowing kind of what your body can handle and the training style that suits you best, because running is not universal. It's not the same for everybody. If you try to fit every single person in the world into the same training plan, then they're not going to do well. There's certain athletes who do better with lower mileage, higher mileage. There's some people that can get away with less sleep, more sleep, things like that. I mean, shoot, my friend sleeps like 4 hours a night. He's shown. I mean, that's not necessarily optimal, but there's definitely people who can get away with it more than others. So that's my take on it. This one I'm pretty excited to talk about. It's very interesting. I haven't heard many people discuss this. It's topic 5, AI and the future of coaching. So now that you're currently coached by legendary Nike Bowerman coach Jerry Shoemaker, is that how you say it?
Schumacher.
Schumacher. Okay. In the next 10 years, do you think the need for in-person coaching will diminish? We'll start with you, Cole.
Yeah, I think we're already seeing, anecdotally speaking, my sister was using ChatGPT to train for her first half marathon. Gave her a pretty solid training plan. Obviously, she wasn't trying to break any records. AI tools are great at giving you the most average answer possible. And so since she just wanted to finish the thing and, push herself out of her limits, like she hadn't trained for anything like that before, ChatGPT gave her a great response and training plan for that need. We as elite athletes sit very far outside the mean, the average, and we're outliers. My undergrad at Stanford, my concentration was in AI, and then my master's was in computer science. So I've been around pre-GPT when large language models were still like laughably bad and just not accurate. And now, different tools, different products have people asking like, oh, is this AGI? Like, when the simulation of human intelligence is so indistinguishable, it begs the question. But in any case, yeah, I think too, like this is in my experience, and I think this will be like the first, honestly, this is probably already happening where AI is augmenting coaches' workflows, giving them better access. Again, like I was saying with information being democratized and you can parse human knowledge at a rate that you could never do before, coaches have a great depth of knowledge at their fingertips. It's a powerful tool, so you have to know how to use it and leverage it the right way, especially if coaches like Jerry, where Jerry is like very anti-tech. He's the artist of coaching, where it's very much vibes based and like it's a spiritual thing for him in the way he like organizes his workouts, even like the way he interacts with athletes to ensure that we're all like doing what we need to do on the day. He sees us as people first, and so he's not necessarily like trying to dig into the data and optimize us as data points. It's just not his approach. There will always be people who don't necessarily work that way or want to integrate that into their workflow. It's a matter of time for your average person. I don't know why they wouldn't leverage a tool, an LLM and AI chat feature to craft their, or even apps like Runna. For most people, that is just a cheaper option. So it's like, why not do that? And then, upgrade to a full-time coach if that's something you want, or you want to train with a team and have a bit more of that human touch. But yeah, I think it'll only become more of that. But I'm curious to hear you guys' takes.
I think AI is going to become better and better at coaching people as just the technology grows and becomes more advanced. I don't think it will get to a point where AI can replace coaching, because like no matter how good AI gets, AI can't sit there and watch you work out. It can't understand you as a person. It only knows what you tell it. It can't sit there and see how you work out, see how you respond to different things, and have that same personal connection that a coach will have with you to be able to provide that very personalized training. Because like, as you were saying, Cole, it just provides the most average answer possible, which works for the average person. But it's like for those people that need something more specialized, or if they're chasing a higher level of performance, I feel like it's going to be hard for AI to be able to provide that same experience that a personal coach can. Even with the rise in technology, I don't think the need for in-person coaching will necessarily diminish. Like, I think the average person will not need a personal coach as much, but I think there's always going to be the higher level athletes will need personal coaches.
Yeah, my take on it is, like you said, I really like the word you use of tool. I think AI should be used as a tool, not AI only. So I feel like coaches can integrate things such as AI, like data points, things like that. But at the end of the day, it can't replace a coach, because a coach is personable. It's tailored to you oftentimes if you find a really good coach and he knows you really well. AI, like Gavin said, can only get data points and drive it out, and it's not always tailored to you. I feel like AI is a really good tool. I feel like people will integrate that more as time goes on. It'll get better and better. But at the same time, I think coaching, especially for professionals, should stay coaching only, and AI should be used as a tool.
Yeah, no, that's great. Too, like one thing I wanted to add is that while something like a chat GPT is a generalist, as I've experimented with these tools and fine-tuned my own models and like built my own models, it's not hard to fine-tune it and specialize it to be like context specific for one, like becoming a domain expert in running, and then also giving it the context of your whole performance database. Like every race you run, every PR, if you were to run that through learning models, overlaying all of your training, like it can absolutely then predict different outcomes based on your entire history of running and every data point that ideally you can feed into that. It's not necessarily something that is available yet at like a wide consumer level. I think we'll see more of that, these specialized models that have really easy ways for people to drop their context into it. And then it's, instantly more of an expert on you than any human coach, because it has this insanely robust data set of you, or data representation. But I think people want people, people feel like they're talking to a person, and these models are becoming akin, more anthropomorphic, more human-like. It's still texting to it, still not the same as looking another person in the face. So maybe 2 years from now, when there's cybernetic, robots that have real human-like faces, it'll be a different story. But
Right.
I'm praying we don't go down that road. That's a little scary.
That does not sound fun, yeah. Our sixth topic is, should aspiring elite runners stick to one or two events, or should they attempt several events at once and try to become more well-rounded? We'll start with you, Cole.
Depends. If you are having really good success at those one or two events, you kind of coincidentally fell into what your niche is, then I think it makes sense to remain specialized. But if you're not necessarily seeing outcomes or performance that you're wanting to, it can't hurt to try other events and even like figure out if you would like a different distance, or if you'd like something like the steeplechase, which is just a lot different of an event from a more bland plain running event. Obviously that's just within the context of track, but I think what I've found is like, I obviously love the process of trying to reach my limits in practice and in training. I don't necessarily care what the race is I'm training for. If anything, like as I've been training for road races and have been doing some road races, I'm finding that it's a lot more engaging, interesting than just running around a circle all day long. And my hip alignment is thinking that, because I'm not like jacking up my hips, running in an oval counterclockwise
Right.
every day. So that's also a bonus. Yeah, it can't hurt, especially as a young athlete. That's the time to explore what niche, fits.
100% agree. What about you, Gavin?
So for a little bit of context, as far as several events goes, I don't have several events to choose from. So for high school, we have our cross country season, which everyone runs the 5K. There's only the 5K. There's no distance but the 5K. So we all specialize in the 5K because we don't have another choice. And then for distance track, we get to run the 800, the 16, or the 32. So we only have 3 different events to choose from, 2 events per meet. So you either do the 8 and the 16 and the 32, or the 8 and the 32. But I think it kind of comes down to people find out what their strengths are. So like if you naturally have that raw top end speed as a distance runner, you kind of end up trending more towards the 8 and the 16. But if you're more of an endurance based, you have to go that longer distance, you kind of end up doing the 16 and the 32. So like for me personally, I drop down towards the 8 and the 16 just because I have more of that top end speed than some of my teammates do. So that's kind of what I'm naturally better at. But it's not necessarily a case of I specialize in that. It's more of just my teammates who are better at the 32, so I just naturally, in the brain, the races they're not quite as good at. I think if I had the option to run a wider range, like Cole said, unless you're good at one particular thing, there's not really a reason to specialize, because then you're just limiting yourself when you could be really good at something else. Yeah, that's my thoughts on that.
For me as a high schooler, I ran 9th grade through 11th grade, and then I decided to drop out my senior year to focus on some longer distances like halves and fulls. And a lot of people were telling me that that was a really bad idea. I was wasting my speed. I shouldn't be chasing halves and fulls. But to be honest, like I said earlier, at the end of the day, it's kind of what you want to run, and no one's forcing you to run. I mean, if you want to run a half or a full, go for it. I've really been focusing on balancing my training so that I can do some quicker stuff like road 5Ks, things like that, while in like half marathon building mode and things like that. And I'm even looking eventually at ultra races. I have a 50K I'm going to run this fall. So next few years, longer distance events. But I feel like you have to even be careful with your training, because if you're trying to specialize, and you do have to hone in, but if you're just going broad, then you can't be too specific with your training either. So if you're not specifically training for like this elite race, like you're trying to get into the Olympic marathon trials, I feel like you can kind of balance your training so that you're doing some quality speed sessions, but also a lot of volume for training for like a longer distance, so that you can still run 5Ks, 10Ks while still having that endurance for a half and a full. Being very intentional with your training and having a good balanced training, a mix of easy, hard, aerobic, anaerobic, things like that. is very helpful.
So now we have a couple questions for just you, because these are ones that kind of be hard for us to answer. So our first question is, what was it like being a student athlete at a top school, and how did you balance your running with your schoolwork and your personal life?
Yeah. It's tough. But, it's what you make of it. You ask people who go to Stanford or student athletes that go to Stanford, they'll tell you probably like the hardest part about Stanford is getting in, and then you can make it as easy as you want. I didn't do that for myself. I mean, like, academics was important to me. It's why I was drawn to Stanford. So it's not that typical that you get somebody drawn to Stanford who doesn't want to excel academically, or at least try or follow their interests. And honestly, I just followed my interest while at Stanford, and it landed me doing more computer science, more computational and technical coursework. It's definitely harder to manage than if I were doing less rigorous majors and content or coursework. So that was definitely hard to learn how to optimize my schedule to ensure that I was giving myself time to complete everything I needed to complete in terms of my academic responsibilities, and then also like recovery and trying to keep my general stress as low as possible so that I could perform as best as I could as an athlete. So that's a very tough balance to strike, and part of what made my athletic career a little bit more volatile at college was that I didn't always get that balance right. You have to sacrifice some things. I hung out with my team all the time, and we were very social, and like that was my community. But yeah, I didn't have like a super huge personal life. Like that was an area that I did have to sacrifice because I just didn't have the bandwidth to do other things. So it's always a subjective journey of figuring out what you want to do, like, and if academics or if athletics is something that you really want to excel at, you have to like match your strategy and match your work, ensure that you're not just talking, you're actually going to set yourself up for success. It's easy. Yeah, it's easy to talk. Yeah, I definitely had to trial and error it. Ultimately, like, it was a great experience to like figure out what my limits were in some ways, like how hard I could press, and you only find that by pressing a little too hard. Yeah, but again, like, that's what I love to do. I love to figure out what my limits are, and I'm somebody who likes to just do everything. So definitely taught myself to be a bit more, well, that I'm not invincible and that I can't just do everything. So gave me a healthy respect for what my limits were.
Yeah, for sure. All right, Cole, what are your best 3 workouts for 5K runners?
Oh, geez, for 5K runners. They all like blend together in some ways too, where I've done so many workouts to connect to what I was talking about in like reducing stress in as many areas as possible. Like, I don't want to think about like my training that much. I just want it to work. And so in an ideal scenario, I have to dedicate very little brain power into making sure my training is, otherwise then, I don't want to be the coach and the athlete. All that being said, like, I would say workouts that I benefited from in high school and then college for the 5K were 400 repeats was one that I would do like more in the track season, and this was like for the mile and 2 mile in high school. It was still something that we would do in college and even like professionally now, where it's like in high school it would be like 10 400s at roughly 60 or 59. I wonder if it was like a minute rest, maybe 90 seconds, but maybe not. And this is at like 5,000 feet, so everything is harder. Everything feels bad at elevation. And at Stanford, like, we had a few different variations. Yeah, it's very brutal. There's like a mile variation where, again, you're doing just 400s, 60 to like 58 off a minute rest. And you're doing like, 10 of those, give or take. So if you can handle that kind of a workout, just like really tapping into that, whatever, like threshold anaerobic zone, and then come out of it and then recover just over a short period of time and then dip into it again, you'll be able to run a really good 5K. Another one that we would do for 5K is like, it would be like alternating a K in 2x400 and then like sets of that kind of thing, where progressively faster each set, going from slower than your 5K goal pace or maybe around 5K goal pace and then a little bit under that. And that's tough. Like, the Ks would always suck doing at like 5K goal pace, because it's long enough that you're like thinking about how much it hurts and you're having to like really convince yourself like, oh, I can do this. Yeah, those are a couple that are pretty gnarly. Yeah, 5K workouts are just brutal though, because it's I don't know, relative to like the half and marathon training I'm doing now, where I'm not having to like dip into the like my lactate lactic zone very much, yeah, it's just a pain cave, lactic headache, all of that
Right.
stuff. So I'm actually very
Yeah.
grateful. I'm not doing as much of that, to be honest.
Right. He's getting some PTSD from his college.
I know, yeah, as I was thinking about it, palms getting sweaty. Yeah, it's PTSD for sure.
Yeah.
All right, so the final question we have for you tonight, how do you deal with the physical toll of professional running? So, like, how do you rest and recover effectively so that you can get the most out of your training?
Yeah, that's a good question. Thankfully, as a professional, it's my job to optimize my daily routine around my performance and then recovery. So if I'm not out doing a run, doing a workout, I come back and the rest of the day is pretty much spent with my legs up. I work a couple part-time jobs, and so while I have things that I'm doing throughout the day, and this is similar case for when I was at Stanford, like I don't have to go to classes and like bike around places, and so I'm able to just be here in my apartment. All of my nutrition is dialed in that sense that I can just eat exactly when I want to, when it's optimal, like before and after my workouts, to make sure I'm getting everything I need from that perspective. Overall, just reducing the stress and the toll that I'm putting my body through by not having as many extracurricular activities and responsibilities to worry about, which as a professional is beneficial, but I like having some stuff on the side to do and some work, intellectual work, to stimulate my mind and brain, to also like give myself the ability to reset and kind of defocus from running. So it's not the only thing I'm ever thinking about and overanalyzing and stressing myself out about. Yeah.
All right, that's a wrap.
Thank you so much for watching episode 5 of the Runner Boys podcast. Once again, I'm Hayden Purdy. I'm joined by my co-host, Gavin Atkinson. Thanks again, Cole Sprout, for joining us. Make sure to check out
CGM Sports. It's an analytics dashboard we're rolling out, something I'm working on with a lot of NCAA programs, to give coaches a general analytics view of all of their athletes' wearable data and analytics on top of that to better inform coaches' decisions when checking out recovery and performance for their athletes. Something we're excited about building out right now. But yeah, appreciate y'all for having me on, and it was great.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, great talking running and all that.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.
Okay.
Blacked out like a phantom. Your phone keeps having a tantrum. You won't boy got the party. This song you're